Thanks, viewers from Sea Ranch. And today we're doing part two of our candidate voices. Our candidates were kind enough to get back together. Again, we've got some additional topics, and I'm hoping you'll learn even more about each of our candidates. Once again, our candidates are this is alphabetical order, Dane Jasper, uh, Linda McCabe, Neil Moran, and Nitin Rao. No particular order, just alphabetic. Thanks, candidates, for meeting again with us today. We're going to hit. We've got about three topics that I want to dive into, and I'll just direct the questions, and we'll just keep jumping around. Let's start off. I want to talk about water infrastructure, an appropriate topic since our current board is looking at some water company issues today in a separate session, and so it's an important issue. Here's where I want to take off, and I'll just let you each respond. As you know, and viewers may not know, our water system at Sea Ranch is 60 years old. At least parts of it are that old, and certainly all of it's not much younger than that. With any water system infrastructure, time takes its toll. Components wear out, they need maintenance, they need replacing. We've uncovered some resiliency issues for the long term about how our water system works. I recently read a 2022 evaluation of the Sea Ranch water system, and I believe that was prepared by Brown and Caldwell, a very well-known engineering firm, and they looked at a lot of those issues and what are the projects we need to do in the next 10, 15, 20 years. And they threw some numbers. Well, they didn't throw, they estimated some numbers about what the cost impact to us might be. And it's somewhere in the range of 18 million, depending on how you look at it, 18 million, but maybe over the next 2 decades. That's a sizable amount of money for our homeowners association. My question is what about our aging water infrastructure? We're looking at some major expenditures in coming years. How are we going to approach that? How are we going to cover it? How will we pay for it? What do we got to do? Dane, let me ask you to kick off with that one.
Thank you, George. I appreciate you putting this forum together so the four of us can chat with you again today. Um, Beyond just water, our infrastructure is aging. The roads we talked about during our last conversation, the hedgerows are obviously, and vegetation management is a huge topic. If we could all get everything to stay the same and hold still and not fall into disrepair, that would be far better. The reality is this infrastructure needs maintenance. In regards to the water system, I haven't read that report, George, so I don't have any expertise about what is required. My initial thoughts are that with an item like a piece of infrastructure which is separately billed, we pay for water, we pay a connection fee. My hope is that we can finance the costs for maintenance of that in our water billing, not in our membership dues. The roads, on the other hand, are a member infrastructure and not separately billed. And hopefully that would be reflective of those who use more, those who are part-timers, and folks who have undeveloped lots. I'd also say we need to be really careful about accepting without substantial questioning and research outside findings and a judgment that we just need to spend a big lump of money all at once. And we need to be creative about finding incremental solutions to infrastructure maintenance in general. And I talked about that a bit in the roadways. It would be an easier thing to say, let's resurface or repave all the roads, but it would be more practical from an economic perspective to figure out which roads are really suffering, which road segments really require care. In a water system, similar principles should apply, and we should repair the parts that need restoration, when they do, and not spend money in advance of when it's necessary to do so. But that's the general principle that we should apply to everything, rather than just saying, well, these experts say this, and here's a contract that'll do it. We'll just put that on the members. I don't think any of us would find that appropriate.
Linda, would you care to add your thoughts?
Was that for me?
No,
Oh,
that
I said Linda.
Thank you. Excuse me,
We'll get
Linda.
we'll get to you, Neil.
No,
okay.
no hurry.
So, because you told us the topics you wanted to talk to, plus I needed to do the research on this anyway. I pulled up the minutes or the agenda from last October's water company board meeting to see all the things for the budget. And and then I also was looking at the agenda for today's meeting, which will be starting at 10:30. So I will not be watching it live, but that was for the audit of the water company. And we had a problem in that in 2012, that was the last time we applied for a rate increase to the California Public Utilities Committee, CPUC. And they recommend doing it every 3 to 5 years. So 2015 is when we should have applied for another rate increase. And we did not. We did not do that until last year. So basically, our membership had 10 years when they didn't have any rate increases. But we still had monies that needed to be spent, and we had an inadequate amount. And so the TSRA budget had to backfill $200,000 a year. Maybe not all 10 years of that, but in the last couple of years. So we made the CPUC request and it was approved. And so the amount of monies for our water company went up starting, well, it was approved in August, so I'm not sure exactly how many months we had of increase. But in looking at the audits, you can see a delta in the money that came in. And I'm expecting that in 2026, that delta will be dramatically higher than it was, say, in 2024 when it was all of one. So anyway, we're getting more money, yay, for our water company. And so that won't be paid for by the dues from our association to make the balance thing. And there are many plans for improvements such as, and this was mentioned recently, automatic meter reading. So there's going to be installing digital, which is gopher resistant meters throughout TSRA. And that's a good thing because we've had little gophers getting to our ion water and shutting that off. So anyway, there's lots of plans for improving our water system, and it's a 30-year plan, and the water company management has been working on that. And looking at this, it looks very good, and I'm confident that we will be able to do that on the 30-year plan. And yeah, it's going to cost a lot of money, but we'll now have more money in reserves for that, thanks to our rate increases, which were overdue.
Neil, take a shot at this, please.
Yeah, I agree with what Linda said. I have some experience with this. I was on the Utilities Committee. I chaired it. The water system is under that committee, and we have consulting engineers, Brown and Caldwell. The last full water master plan they prepared was 2009. There was a minor update 2015. Then there's a draft revision 2022. Last month I met with Brian Murphy, the head of our water company, and I went over the recommendations. And like Linda, I'm confident that Sea Ranch can fund the improvements to our water system over the 30-year period. When you read the well, let me back up. Just to review, we have 47 miles of water pipe at Sea Ranch. And our water mains run from 3 inches on the small side to 14 inches on the large size. We have 25,000 feet of PVC pipe, and about 1% of our pipe is iron or steel. The water company has been replacing all the iron and steel piping, but it does take a little while. As many of you know, we get the actual water from 2 wells, and they are poetically called wells 3 and 4, and we draw water from the aquifer beneath the South Fork of the Gualala River. And I say it like that, like I'm didactically, because some people think we take it directly out of the Gualala River. No, it's an aquifer that's a few hundred feet below. And we have, luckily, we're blessed with plenty of water. Plenty of water. Lynn and I live most of the time in Marin County, and we're stuck with the water we have in Marin County gets 25% of its water from the Russian River. We have to buy it. So when I say we, I mean Marin County. Unlike Marin County, Sea Ranch, we have so much water in that aquifer. It's wonderful. Okay, and so there are some updates needed, and like Linda said, I agree with her. They can be financed over 30 years. If anybody wants to get into the nerd stuff, in the 2022 draft revision to the Brown and Caldwell Water Master Plan is this great drawing that graphically depicts where we hold all our water. Okay, besides our giant reservoir, we have all these tanks, and we do need to do things like have a flexible connections between the tank and the water system. For example, tank 8, our biggest tank, 900,000 gallons, it's right on the San Andreas Fault. Okay, so it's prudent to have a flexible, those things cost money. And so there will be some, pardon me, I meant tank 1 is on the San Andreas Fault. So we do need things like that. So I've gone on long enough. I agree with the general point that Linda made, that we can finance all of those improvements over 30 years, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Nathine, your thoughts?
Yeah. So, George, thanks so much for organizing this forum and having us all together. Appreciated. I think infrastructure works well when it sort of hums in the background, and the average person can go about enjoying their life at Sea Ranch without worrying about water or the resilience of energy or roads and the like. And that's a responsibility of us as board members to invest proactively in this. And so in many ways, I think holistically of all infrastructure, and that's where the 30-year plan is so helpful. The idea that while $18 million for water might seem daunting, so is $17 million for roads and everything else, but these are plannable obligations rather than future surprises. And so there are really sort of 3 aspects to think about. First, and Dane's articulated this really well about the principle of roads, which is which segments fail when, what's the cost curve, and how do you really prioritize the investments that you make. Second, sort of like how do you balance where the funding comes from, and what's the right pacing so that we don't create a hole that we need to dig ourselves out of, but also we aren't burdening folks too much. This is a ultimately, this is a capital allocation issue. In my prior roles in corporate life and otherwise, I've managed hundreds of millions of dollars of capital and worked through partnering with different stakeholders and prioritizing investments. And I think we can take the same approach here for our water. One of the points that Neil mentioned in his second statement was about how sort of past investments pay off. Like we had debt for the water company that we're rolling off, and that's going to free up capital. And so I don't think we start from a bad place where nothing has been done and now we need to play catch up. I appreciate the fact that past boards, past team members have been just thoughtful custodians of the water company. And so we start from a good place, but we need to make sure we don't lose momentum investing in this important area. Having your own water company creates certain levels of freedom and independence, but with that comes the responsibility to invest. And I'm encouraged by the fact that we're investing here.
Thank you. Let's move now to, I think we alluded to this earlier, vegetation management at the Sea Ranch, particularly in regards to the hedgerows. We all know that the Monterey cypress are a really defining element in the landscape at Sea Ranch. And landscape architects refer to this as the cultural landscape. In other words, the existence of those hedgerows is a visible reminder of what this land was before Sea Ranch existed. In this case, it was sheep ranches. And that reminds us of the hedgerows remind us of that, as well as performing a useful function in being a windbreak on a very windy part of the coast. Recently, we saw a removal of Monterey cypress trees around the Del Mar Center at various locations. A number of members expressed surprise, some amount of dismay there. We heard some explanations about the need that the trees may have exceeded their lifespan, their age, possible disease, and why they maybe it was okay to remove them, or that was certainly the plan that was carried out. But we've got a lot of Monterey cypress and in a lot of areas of Sea Ranch. Thoughts on the general topic of vegetation management, specifically the Monterey cypress hedgerows. Linda, let's start off with you on this one.
Thank you. Yes, I was doing another deep dive yesterday and started reading. If anyone's interested, they can go on the website, and on the quick links, there's some hot topics, and one is hedgerow stewardship. And so I started printing out reports starting in 1991, where Joe McBride was looking at our hedgerows along with other vegetation. And the history is that these Monterey cypress were originally planted in 1916 by Walter Frick, and that was to make some ranchettes for the grazing of the sheep and to have windbreaks. And when Larry Halpern, our original landscape architect, came, he liked that, and he also planted 1 million trees. And that was based on recommendation that maybe, 1 out of 5 would last and the rest wouldn't. And instead, basically all of them took. And so we're kind of now like the tree ranch more than the Sea Ranch in some places. So the 1991 report recommended maintenance of some of these hedgerows and in an order. And then in 2001 was the signature hedgerows for the 21st century plan for hedgerow rehabilitation, talking about how Monterey cypress is not a native tree for this area. It's really for Monterey, but it takes to this area, but it has a lifespan and then it starts to fall apart. So there's many recommendations in that. And then there was another hedgerow signature plan in 2015 and then in 2024. And so regarding to the hedgerows, the Monterey cypress around the Del Mar Center, in February 2024, there was another bomb cyclone, and one of those trees fell and damaged, but did not destroy the Del Mar Center recreation, the women's locker room ceiling, roof line. And that really was a wake-up call about those trees, because when one goes, then the others are weakened because they're used to all of them being together. And Dr. Chris Lee, the forest pathologist from CAL FIRE, came out and was looking at all of the trees and discovered that, yes, they were diseased. Now, fungal disease in trees, fungus grows slowly. It's not something you can go back to the lab and boom, get a chemistry thing of glucose is 250. No, fungus grows very slowly and it can be months before it grows. Anyway, those trees were diseased and they were in striking distance of the Del Mar Center Hall, which is the heart of our community. That's where we have our meetings. And if ever needed, that will be our emergency shelter. And when I listened to Dr. Lee speak last fall about those trees, I stood there in the parking lot and saw how towering they were and what danger they were to our hall. And so, yes, they were cut down because they were old, falling apart, and they were diseased, and they were a danger. And so they had to be taken down. And I'm sorry to see them go because they were beautiful, but they had to go.
Neil, do you want to attack this one?
Yes. Linda McCabe is again a very reliable resource and historian, and everything she said is correct. I also agree with her and want to emphasize how sad it is when you have to make that tough call to bring down trees. It may seem off topic, but I get it. At Lynn and my house in San Rafael, we have these giant oaks that are really signature, and one of them died a few years ago. Really, just died, came down. It's so, and it really sad. It really ruins it. And so I get it. I go by Del Mar. It looks like a moonscape, but I support the hard decision that was made to take the trees down. And if someone wants to say, Neil, you bad man, SOB, whatever, I will embrace that. It is nasty to do that, to take down all those trees. I mean that sincerely. We are going to have some major planning to do about the future. We have I believe it's called a working group. I want to say task force, but I think it's a working group.
It's a work group.
Look at that, and that's the right way to do it. And so it's going to be a long-term decision. It's going to be one of the hardest we've ever made, because they're just so key to everything around us. But if we have to make a tough call and cut down hedgerows or parts of them before they go down and hurt people or hurt property, or we'll have to do that.
Nathine?
Yeah, thanks. So agree with much of what Linda and Neil said. I read the hedgerow working report from 2024. And for starters, one of the things I was encouraged was just the number of Sea Ranch team members, Sea Ranch members who were part of that committee have backgrounds in forestry, have backgrounds in how we can be just sort of thoughtful custodians of what we see. It's such a core part of our iconography. When you think of Sea Ranch, I was speaking to someone who has just like memories of being at the Del Mar pool by the cypress in this person's case with family members who are no longer with us. And so it represents sort of the history of Sea Ranch. It represents memories we have here. And so it makes sense that we feel terribly if a tree ever comes down. As beautiful as they are, they're also like very different clusters. And so when you think about the segment near One-Eyed Jacks, the segment near Horizon Reach, the segment near Del Mar, you can't apply the same strategy for all three clusters. Like the soil is different, and the strategies for those three could be different. I think the report from 2024 is encouraging. I'm really encouraged by the fact that we're actually taking money and assigning it towards this. And so while the hedgerows aren't new, I think the investment in proactive rehabilitation is new. The decision-making framework on considering safety and which trees you rehabilitate first is encouraging. I think we're being thoughtful about which locations you can replace a cypress with a cypress, but which places you might need other species like redwoods and the like. And so being thoughtful there is encouraging. I know Chris and the team from Berkeley took those 70 samples. I'm really curious to find out what they learned along the way. And so eager to appreciate that it's science-driven, eager to see that report. And so since 2024, I think that'll be the next really significant piece of data to inform what we do in different locations. I think the community has a role. I love the idea of the adopt a hedgerow project. And so I think a lot of opportunity where folks want to really care about what we do over the next 20, 40, 60 years. And this really represents an opportunity where hopefully 40 years from now, someone's looking back and saying, I'm grateful for the folks who in 2026 made the right choices that made Sea Ranch what it is today.
Thanks, Nateen. Dane, I'll let you wrap up this topic.
Thanks, George. Clearly, the hedgerows are a defining landscape architecture characteristic of the Sea Ranch and are really emotionally important to everyone. And so, at least in this issue, I think everyone is by and large in alignment that, we don't want to end up with a moonscape, I think was how it was described by Neil. On the other side, we don't want anybody to be hurt or property be damaged by falling trees. And I know the grand firs and some of the other shallow rooted fir trees are a significant hazard. And those need to be prioritized for safety. And I also think that the public response to the process around the hedgerow management highlights some of the ways that we could do better as a community around engaging the people who are most closely affected by an issue. And, I think the challenges with hedgerow management and the creation of the hedgerow working group and the work that was done by Gina Hubble and Linda Lipkin and the others in that group is a reparative part of that process. And I think they've done some really good work. And I really appreciate that, as Nateen says, that report has a focus on, individual hedgerow conditions and case-by-case rehabilitation plans. What our community wants to feel is that the impact on them personally, whether it's when they come to go swimming or use one of our facilities, or when they are in their home, that the impacts on them were considered and then they had an opportunity to participate. One of the areas that I think we could do better as a community is outreach to our members around these things that affect them locally. And I'll say as a parent of 3 teenagers, one still in middle school and 2 in high school, and a HOA member at the Sea Ranch, I get a lot of emails. I get the next 10,000 minutes from one school, I get a sports update from another school, and I get the info alert from the Sea Ranch. And when I see a subject, the info alert, and I start reading the first page of that, I'm not clear that we're doing a good enough job of highlighting the issues that are inside of the outreach that we make to members. I think we're doing a pretty good job of writing things in a big newsletter. But when issues like this that are so culturally significant are coming up, we should really have individual outreach and email where the subject line is hedgerow update in region X, so that people who are affected by that, before all the trees were cut at the Del Mar Center, perhaps there's a notification that that's happening and the reasoning for why and the process for that decision making. We all need to recognize the health and safety of the trees. We need to grieve the loss of the trees which are necessary to remove. But we also, I think, as humans, if we're not involved in an explanation and it's just handed down, we assume the worst in some cases. Oh, they're not being careful enough. Oh, they're spending money wrongly. Oh, they've taken the easy way out. And people end up second guessing decisions that were made with expert input and a lot of consideration around a topic that we all know is super important. So as I see, drama and people upset about the process, that highlights for me that we could do better in how we communicate. And we've touched on other issues in other forums, and I think that's a recurring theme.
Yeah. Thank you, Dane. And that segues to the next topic that I wanted to bring up, which is our communications strategy. we've seen, we've seen, and I hear about from folks that a number of things happened that people were caught off guard, didn't know they were happening. We just spoke about the hedgerows at Delmar, certain level of communication, but still large segments of the Sea Ranch were caught off guard there. We had a little bit of a recent kerfuffle on the so-called compliance verification form. And whether that's a good tool or whether that's an avenue for abuse or whatever, but same thing. No one heard about it until they just saw it before. So people had an issue there. Certainly, the North Cell Tower has been an important one with a lot of opinions across the board. We discussed in our last interview, and I think the cameras at the airstrip were sort of similar. We eventually had discussion and debate on those, but we didn't know those issues were coming. Or a lot of what I'm hearing from folks is they didn't have an idea that those topics were coming along. So here's the question. What do we need to do as an association, as a community, about our communication strategy, particularly on the bigger issues? Recognizing that every time we fill a pothole, we're not going to have a big communications plan for filling a pothole. But a cell tower, Monterey Cypress at Delmar coming down, those are fairly major issues for all of us. So in that regard, what, if anything, do we need to do about a communication strategy? Neil, I'm going to let you kick this one off, please.
Yeah, I think we're doing a great job, a terrific job on communications. And I think it's just human nature when something, when I haven't paid attention to something, and Sea Ranch or the city of San Rafael or whatever takes some action that I have a strong feeling about, I think, what the heck is going on? Here in San Rafael, I don't want to offend people at Sea Ranch, but here in San Rafael, there's a 18-story housing development going up just on the edge of the downtown area. Big cranes, everything. My wife really was upset. You know what? This just surprised us. And I went back on the city's website. They publicized the heck out of it. But my wife doesn't get those emails. I get a email feed and all that every week from the city and whatnot. And if you read the local newspaper, be like reading, our Sea Ranch publications, you would have seen that. And so I think I really like what Dane said earlier. I think he really has insight into this. When something happens, something's dear to us. I think Dane was referring to our hedgerows, but I think it applies across the board. When it's so central and the communication didn't grab, I'll speak for myself, didn't grab me. And then I think, well, it was done by human nature. I get not paranoid, but I get suspicious. And I think some of that goes on. So I like what Dane said about we have to do, not putting words in your mouth, Dane, but we have to do an even better job of communicating. But I want to say, I think we're doing a good job. I'm looking at all these key dates on a North Cell Tower. Now I know we already talked about that, but people say, oh well, this just came out of nowhere. Well, no, it didn't. And so, by the way, the North Cell Tower it's not a done thing. No one's made a decision other than designating a possible site. But I think I've covered it. I think we're doing a great job. We've got to do a better job.
Mateen, your thoughts?
Yeah. So one of the things that's been fascinating over the last several sort of weeks and months is appreciating how so much of the role for any board member, committee member is communications. At some level, Menka and her organization run the day-to-day at Sea Ranch. And so part of the role of the board is being strategic and thoughtful over the long term, but part of it is really communicating. And communication is a sort of two-way street. It's as much listening to its membership. And I think there's sort of two facets of it I want to very quickly explore. First, what can the board do better And the second, how can we as members better calibrate our expectations of what excellent communications is? So we're not striving for something we'll never achieve. So first, as far as the board goes, I think there's a lot of the frustration really comes at the front end of issues where folks want to not be surprised. They want to have a real opportunity to sort of build out, be involved in before a decision is finalized and not after. And so more proactive communication there is important. I think ultimately that's on the board. I have empathy for folks like Bianca, trying to, herd 2,000 cats at the same time. That is not an easy job. And so it falls on the board. I think it's not just the quantity of communication, but the quality of communication. So for example, for the extensive brouhaha about the cell tower, I would love to see a proposal that actually where we know how much Verizon's going to pay. And so we have more quantity of communication than actually quality. And I think having just those substantive updates with specifics can go a long way. Sometimes it creates a void, which causes people to come up with conspiracy theories, fear the very worst, and at some level start being the source of communication for their neighbors who reach out to their trusted confidants to know what's going on. And so I think we're ultimately a service organization. And so we owe, for anyone on the board, we owe it to our members to be proactive, even repetitive. Sometimes you need to mention something at least 3 times before the message goes through. That's true for branding. That's true here as well. And so it's really important. That said, I want to also quickly explore the other facet of it. I think the board role is a volunteer role, and it's important that folks serving there are treated with a certain level of dignity. I think there's a level of vitriol sometimes on communication, and that's unfortunate. And I think we can do better. Where truly people serving on the board are trying to do their best, are trying to spend as much time as possible with as many members as possible. And I think there's a real tendency to rush to the very worst judgment, that they're making decisions and they're not sharing it with us. Or worse, they've already decided what's going to happen and they're just doing a dog and pony show. And often life's a lot more boring and less conspiratorial than we think. And so I think having a little bit of empathy, a little bit of faith for folks who are stepping up, serving, goes a long way. And then finally, the best way to participate is to run for elections. It's healthy to have institutional knowledge. It's also healthy to have new households represented on the board, on committees. And so to everyone who is frustrated because they feel like they're maybe heard but not agreed with, or they're just not being heard, please get involved. And that's the best way to make change. And so I encourage folks to do more of that. To the extent members share communication, it's also really important to share facts. There's this tendency to paraphrase, which can be dangerous. A good example is the cell tower legal deed, where there are a number of folks sharing text that simply isn't true. You can go read the actual legal deed. And so to the extent that we're sharing information with our fellow members, I think to the extent we share facts, that precision goes a long way. But really empathize that communications is hard. I think we need to have empathy in both directions and not strive for something that we're never going to reach.
Dane, your turn.
Thank you. I think, Neil is right in recognizing the huge amount of work that is done by staff and committees and working groups to draft information about what's going on in our community. And you see it if you dive deeply into our website. The information is there if you go looking for it. And, this is my challenge with, for example, the info alert. I get an info alert and I haven't got time to read the whole thing. And I don't know that there's something buried in it that is relevant to my property or my use of an amenity. And then 6 months later, a decision gets made in what feels like a very sudden way. And it's a defensible decision because, gosh, we told you about that 6 months ago. It was buried in an info alert, so not our fault. And that does not feel good to people. And so I think that there is an opportunity to take the communications that we're already putting effort into crafting and do a better job of disseminating those to stakeholders who have an interest in those specific issues. And that might mean, emails that are issue specific, emails that are region specific, north or south, or certain blocks of our property overall, and certain stakeholders, people who play tennis or pickleball or use the airport, or who are swimmers, folks who are on the bluff as opposed to the ridges and the forests, who have different interests. And the other, and I talked about this at a previous forum, I feel like we really need to ask our members for their input via regular surveys. And we need to make sure those aren't too onerous, but I don't know that we have enough of the general membership's voice being heard. And, I talk about exit surveys. When people sell their homes and move away, I'd really like to understand why, because I've heard anecdotally from some that they, really didn't feel like they were included well in the community, and they decided to move away. How could those issues be sought out earlier, and how can we make sure people are heard? Natine, I think you made a point about sometimes people feel like it's a dog and pony show. The decision's already been made, but let's have a forum and give people a few minutes to talk and then decide what we decided anyway. That really irks people. And I think we need to be, as board members, not dismissive of people's concerns, not belittle their viewpoints. And I, as a association member, when I have spoken at the board, I have felt like my viewpoints were dismissed and belittled. And I, fact-based is also a key point, Natine. Misinformation is used to refute accurate information, and that is doubly frustrating. My issues with the way that communication occur and the way that decisions are made, I think, are echoed by many other members, and it's the reason that I'm, running for this role, is to try to bring a pragmatic and open strategy as a board member, with an open heart, listening to everyone and collaborating to problem solve. Okay, you're frustrated about this, and it looks like it's going in this other direction. Let's build a bridge there and figure out what are the points we can agree on, and what's the new information we can bring. The hedgerows are a great example. It's like, it's an issue we all wish weren't a problem. How can we educate and inform so that people are not feeling like they're being blindsided, despite it being, necessary decisions? So communication, I think we write a lot of material. I'm not sure that material is getting to the people who would later have an interest in it. And Neil, you're right. If folks read the newspaper and went to the council meetings, in San Rafael, they would know more about that high rise, and similarly here. But not everyone has that time and energy, but they still have a topic that's important to them, but they're busy with the rest of their lives. And we need to find a way to surface those topics to them earlier in processes, so they don't feel like they're getting railroaded. And then when they come with concerns, it can't be a foregone conclusion. A board needs to accept new information and new input, and not dismiss the people who bring it, and consider it and go through a deliberative process that's more inclusive.
Thank you. Linda, on this topic of communication strategy, what do you think?
I think I'm going to kind of reiterate something that I said at the other candidates forum that was held by the Sea Ranch Forum, is that complaining about communication is a perennial. It's an evergreen topic. And I remember complaints about the website. I have to say that the redesign of the website is so much easier for me to find things. I really appreciate the work that Bianca and her team did in redesigning the website. I still sometimes use the search tool to find what I'm looking for, but it's much easier to find what I'm looking for. And I got to say that many of our members are never going to even see this forum because they come to the ranch to relax, and they are not interested at all and what is going on in the day-to-day operations of the ranch. I can see that clearly in my next door neighbors who I'm dear friends with. Eric comes here to play golf. Julie comes here to relax and unwind. They probably don't read the info alerts if they're subscribed. They probably don't read the bulletin. I doubt that they get the printed one. It's what their purpose is one thing. And then we have other members who want to be engaged, but surface, and others are deeply engaged. And it's all up to the individuals as to how much effort they want to actually read the communication that is being put in front of them. And this has been a perennial thing. And I gave a quote from a member, and I'm blanking on it now, who is from the 1990s when she and her husband, Millie Davis, that was it. She complained then that people weren't coming to the board meetings. And she had been a member since 1968, I believe. And she and her husband went to every single board meeting since they became a member. And they drove from Sacramento here. So they were paying attention, and they were dismayed that people weren't. But it's a choice. So complaining about communication is a perennial thing, because all of a sudden you find out there is a high rise that you weren't aware of because you missed that. But it doesn't mean that the attempts to communicate aren't there. And the whole kerfuffle about a complaint form, that for the people who are watching this and are like, what is that? It's like, that is from the Sea Ranch listserv, which I mentioned in my first statement. So you may or may not be on the listserv, and you may or may not be reading it every day, but there was a link to a new form on the website, which there isn't a hyperlink. The only way you can find it right now is from the link from the info alert. And that is to make it easier for staff to follow up on complaints from members. Because right now, people are calling or they're writing long emails, and they're hard to follow through. And so this is something to make it easier for staff to follow up. And it reminds me of when I worked at Healdsburg Hospital, and if there was something and I called engineering, can you help me with this? And they're like, yes, I can, but please write it down so we can record everything that we're doing. And so that's what this is. It's trying to make a record of complaints. And because of that new form, I actually used it last night to talk about a tree that's down the end of Broadreach on the bluff. And there's some branches that I think could fall on a neighbor's house. And I don't know them because they just bought the house and stuff like that. Anyway, it's a tool. And to complain about a tool for the membership or for the staff because you're questioning the reasoning behind it, I think, give a little latitude for staff. So I've gone on long enough, and I'll let it go with that. Thanks.
All right, thank you. We're going to wrap up today's session, and I'm going to ask you all to be brief, some wrap-up comments specifically about why you want to do this. But I'm going to introduce each one of you individually and then call upon you. And I'm going to introduce you with some, I don't know, something odd that I've heard from folks or whatever. Not necessarily a negative thing, but perhaps a perception, and let you respond in whatever way you choose. But give us a brief idea of why you'd be a good board member, why you'd like to be a board member. Let's start. I think Nitin, you get to be first on this one. So let's see. Comments that I've heard. Nitin, you're very well spoken, and we understand. Everyone understands that you have had a very significant role in the tech industry for quite a while. Not all tech guys have a great reputation out there. You know, we all think, oh God, Elon Musk, what a what a monstrosity. Some people think that. Um, are you just another tech guy who's showed up and wants to be on the board? Counter that if you would, and tell us why you'd make a good board member. I'm not trying to like pick on you, Natine. I'm gonna give everybody a chance here.
Sure, thanks, George. And as the Indian guy on the call, I'm happy to live up to the stereotype of being tech guy as well.
Okay,
Uh,
okay.
so Sea Ranch is an incredibly special place in our life. My in-laws have been coming here since 1969. It's the place where I proposed to my husband. It's where we spend a lot of time as a family, where I see my nephews and niece growing up. I spoke about how we collect photos every year and publish a book, and it's fun to look back and see photos of people who were with us, aren't with us anymore, to see how kids are growing up, and so it's a very meaningful place. It's a place to really introspect and reflect, and to be the best person in our best person we can become. We hosted the 60th one of the celebrations for the 60 years of Sea Ranch, and it made me realize just how excited we are to help influence in our own small way the next 60 years of Sea Ranch. We'll be owners of Sea Ranch, a home in Sea Ranch 60 years from now, and we have the opportunity to get involved, and sort of shape what it becomes, and in many ways be part of the solution rather than just complaining. It also occurred to me that there are tons, as the demographic changes, there are tons of folks who want to be more engaged in Sea Ranch, don't always know how, and want to be a bridge to getting more people involved, both by being more involved myself, but also engaging new owners at Sea Ranch who want to participate in different ways, and hope to do so. Yes, I bring a background in tech. I helped build Cloudflare, the cybersecurity company. I took it from a couple dozen people to over 5,000 employees. Like Dane, have had experience managing team members, managing teams of hundreds of people, working with different stakeholders, large budgets in the hundreds of millions of dollars, which is something I know Dane has done as well. But I think we're more multifaceted. I think when I want to look back on my life 40, 60 years from now, I don't want to just be tech guy. I want to be someone who helped make my community better. And I can do that today. And this is one of the communities I care deeply about. My husband cares deeply about. And we want to be involved, and we want to make it a better place. And I think you do that by creating those intergenerational friendships. You do that by showing up, whether it's here on this goal, or even being a patient listener to someone you agree with, someone you don't agree with, but you at least want to understand where they're coming from because they have deeply held beliefs. And so, irrespective of the outcome of this election, want to be more engaged because Sea Ranch is a special place, and I think we can shape the legacy for what happens 40, 60 years from now. But
Thank you.
appreciate the question. And if anyone has more questions, feel free to reach out to me directly as well.
Thank you, Natine. Neil, I'll pick on you next. Let's see. Many of us here at Sea Ranch, remember you've been a board member, and you've been the board chair at least 1 year, maybe it was two, I don't recall, but one. Okay, but you've been on the board. You've had a term on the board, and some of those years there were some tough decisions which you were a part of, particularly in regard to who was our community manager at the time. That was pretty tumultuous. And then you haven't run for the board the last few years, and yet here you are. Your name popped out. Uh, haven't you had enough, Neil? Why are you back?
That's great. I embrace all that. I we talked about a little earlier in this taping. The board's going to encounter some hard decisions. We talked about the hedgerows. Okay, the larger topic of vegetation management. All right, I think we have an incredibly unnatural fuel load. Okay, I think we need to take out the brush and small limbed trees in certain areas. I think in our central forest, we need to remove the ladder fuel, okay? The lower, what is it, 5 feet, 6 feet? Because we are courting disaster, a catastrophic fire. Am I saying? And I would like to participate in decisions in the next 3 years that will look good 50 years from now, 80 years from now. Wow. Those board members embraced those. They made the tough calls. They realized if you want a friend and you're on the board, buy a dog. Okay. I want to reflect on what a great the other candidates, not myself. We have an amazing slate of candidates. Okay. I've already mentioned Dane and Linda. Sit down with Nitin. He's an amazing guy. Okay. Speaking about the other candidates, they bring things that their own personal experiences, business, leadership, whatever, that is just going to be a great contribution to our community. I'm really excited about this. I look forward to serving if that's what the members want. But if for some reason members vote for two of the other three candidates, one of the other three candidates, I really think we're going to be in good hands, and I'm very happy that these fine people, Linda and Dane and Nitin, are running for the board. I don't like talking about myself. Does any of you feel that way when you talk about it? I get queasy. Dane, you and I have to sit down. I want to hear about your teenagers. I remember those days. You're great. Anyway, you're all great. Bye. Done.
Thank you.
Thanks. Now, Linda, I'm gonna pick on you next, if I may. As everyone knows, your husband Scott has been on the board for the last 3 years, and then some years ago he was on the board also. So I'm not sure how many years he sat on one board or another, but it's been a good chunk of time. Why should members think of you? Will a member say, well, Linda's Scott 2.0? Same thing, same thing over. Everyone knows I'm not picking on you here. Tell us why that is or isn't true, or why it doesn't matter.
Thank you, George. I am my own person. I have my own thoughts. Someone said something about me being directed. It's like going, I'm a thespian, and so I take direction from directors when I'm on stage. But otherwise, I have my own thoughts and my own ideas, and I don't always agree with my husband. We may look in the same direction, but we have different points of view. And that's a literary reference, POV. So anyway, George, I wanted to thank you for your public service, for doing interviews on this Sea Ranch Life YouTube channel. You've done that with many different people in our community, and I think that is a benefit for the greater Mendonoma community. I want to thank my fellow candidates for participating, because I know there have been times in the past when, George, you've had difficulty getting all candidates at the same time. So yeah. This is twice where all of us were able to find a mutual agreed time and date, and this is good. I also want to thank the membership who are engaged in this process and are watching until the very end, because like I said, not all members are as engaged in this. And this is what democracy looks like. And on the candidate statements, and I would be honored to receive your support and your votes. Thank you.
Thanks. Dane, I had somebody reflect to me, was asking me about the various candidates and made a comment to me about you. And so my barb for you is this. The question came to me. They said, "Well, I don't really know this Dane Jasper people, but isn't he kind of a one-issue guy? He's up in arms about the airport. He's part of those pilots. Is he a one-issue guy, and the airport's all he really cares about?" By the way, I didn't answer the question. I said you'll have to watch the interview and let Dane first speak for himself. Are you a one-issue guy, Dane?
No, George, and I appreciate that you're giving us all a challenging question here and a bit of an attack, and that's just fine. The the issue of the airport is what got me involved in governance here because I felt left out, sort of mistreated and frankly belittled. And I found that really frustrating. Our homeowners are not a problem to be managed. They are our community. And when you have homeowners who, want to file lawsuits about an issue or want to move away because of an issue or how they've been treated, we're not acting like a community. And so, my time in corporate life in technology at Sonic um, has been about customer service, number one, collaborating with the public rather than being in opposition to the public, and recognizing the relationship with staff as team members and working through the difficult issues, providing mentorship and training and support to develop team members in an organization to best serve the community that it reaches out to. And so it's accurate that I am a pilot, and my wife is as well. And we chose to live at the Sea Ranch because we're able to fly to and from, and it's quick and convenient. And that's one of the exciting characteristics of the Sea Ranch is that for those who choose to fly in, that's a possibility. And it's also, I think, a valuable amenity. You'll see whenever a home is for sale, a picture of the airport is generally included in the listing agreement because there are folks who would like to buy a house that they could fly to, especially in one in such a beautiful and remote area. But really what that issue awoke in me was a dissatisfaction with the way that homeowners are treated and a belief that we could do better. And so I decided to step forward and try to bring my experience in customer service and in management and leadership to the board of the Sea Ranch. And I look forward to serving, and I look forward to collaborating with staff and addressing the issues that arise here as we manage, what is an amazing, beautiful resource that all of us care so much about. And so I would say I appreciate everybody's votes. I'll also say, Neil, you're right. We have some wonderful candidates here. And, I would appreciate folks' support. But I do think that, all the folks that are standing forward here are articulate, intelligent, caring individuals. And that's beautiful to see.
Thank you so much. Well, I'd like to thank each of you candidates for participating today. It's tough to get us all coordinated on schedules, but we really appreciate it. For viewers, you've been watching This Sea Ranch Live Candidate Voices. This has been part 2. If you missed part 1, it's still out there. Go watch it and listen to these folks and get an idea of who the candidates are you like. The candidates, I believe their emails or contact information is all out there. You can contact any candidate with your thoughts or questions or whatever. Thank you again, candidates. This has been Candidate Voices Part 2.